Hello, hello, and welcome back to Season 2 of Tome Travelers. This week, we travel into a tome of dock wagons and data jacks with Shadowrun.
Fast Yearly Podcast presents the Tome Travelers.
It's a series of conspiracies, conflicting agendas, and petty jealousies, all building upon, feeding upon, and excreting into an unending web of dreck that people wade through every day and call it life. If there was one Dark Lord controlling everything, and we could drive a magic sword through his heart to free the world, that would be grand. Such clarity, such focus, alas. So what's the lesson in all of this? That I did all of it for nothing? Just the opposite, schmuck. The lesson is this. The game is rigged. The cards are stacked. The dice are loaded. It's the same as it always was. Every cycle, people in power exert power. Little people cower in their homes, think what they're told to think, and buy whatever product will help them forget how horrible their lives are for another day. And that's why we don't play their fragging game. We don't swallow their dreck sandwich and politely ask for another. It's why we run the shadows. That's where real life is, kid. Reality's living in the place no one wants you to see. Shadowrun.
But yeah, hello, this is Roxanne, and I'm here with John.
Hi, guys.
And we're with Sam.
Hello, hello.
As we announced at the end of first season, Sam has moved out, so he's calling in to join us for the next couple episodes. So if he sounds different, that's why.
Ain't technology grand?
Ain't it? When it works. But that's quite fitting for our episode tonight.
No, absolutely. That's really fitting, to be honest. You know, the wireless world is something that they didn't foresee when they first made Shadowrun. But let's get into that. So Shadowrun is what we're going to be talking about today, which is a game I think I can wax on quite a bit about. And Roxy has had a chance to play it.
I've played it one time. I played it for a couple hours. It wasn't very long.
And Sam, you're familiar with this game, right?
I played it when it started, actually. I had the first edition by FASA, and we played it when I was in California.
Oh, yeah.
Holy mackerel, it was so much fun.
So, yeah, as Sam mentioned, Shadowrun is originally by FASA, which we've mentioned when we talked about BattleTech on this show last season. And this game was published in 1989. Coming up with the show notes for the show, it's like, you know, we've actually had a few shows come up in 1989, and it's kind of hard to keep finding new events from 1989. So I was like, well, why don't we look at the wonderful events of the false future that is present in Shadowrun?
The false future.
Yeah, because, well, when Shadowrun came out in the 80s, it foresaw a future quite different in ways from ours currently. Mm-hmm. But they created a timeline from the year of publishing forward of events that would take place.
Yeah. So
really interesting, and some of it's a little bit crazy, but as we go through these events, ask yourself, could you see these things actually happening? I'm going to go ahead and read them off here. Are you ready, Sam?
Yeah.
All right. So in 1999, February 2nd, the Canadian government pushes the Dene tribe off their land, ignoring their pending claim, to use it for further business development. Do you think that's something that could actually happen in this day and age?
Not by the Canadian government.
Probably not by Canadians.
No, I like Canada, I think, but been watching a lot of Canadians lately, and they are way too high on their maple syrup up there about how nice they are, and I'm sure they are very nice people, but I can see any government pushing any... Yeah. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about this franchise except for the little bit that I've played, and so is the Dene tribe an indigenous tribe, or is it like a fantasy race tribe?
These are all Indian tribes that actually exist.
Okay. See, and I'm just have no knowledge of anything.
Yeah. They're
listeners.
They're not from down here. We know we know the Apaches, we know the Iroquois, because these are all names that are very common for the areas that we grew up in. Yeah, the Dene tribe, it really does exist. So continuing on, though. On October 26 of 1999, the Supreme Court of the United States finds that corporations have the right to maintain a private security force following riots and attacks on their corporation that resulted in multiple deaths. This was at least 50 deaths initially during the first attack that takes place, and it escalated because it turned into a riot. The riots were a result of medical supplies being priced too high and benefiting corporations. Do we see this as a possible thing?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the drug prices coming into the fray, coming to the fore, rather. But I thought corporations kind of sort of already had a private, well, I don't know. Is it like a company that does security for a bunch of groups? For a bunch of companies?
There are companies that do that, and there are companies that hire security firms that these are guys walking around armed on business campuses.
Yeah.
But this was in 1989, and this is how they saw the future going for this game. But let's keep going. I mean, on July 10th of 2000, a Japanese corporation operating in the United States gains the rights to have the first private nuclear power facility for their factories and buildings. Could y'all see that happening?
No.
Not really.
No, not right now.
Everybody's still skittish with nuclear power, so.
Yeah.
Well, and with our current administration, that doesn't benefit the United States. It's only benefiting this Japanese corporation, and we want America to make money, not Japan.
Yeah.
America.
In 2000, NASA sends robot probes to Mars and begins planning a manned mission. And this actually appeared in their mission book that came out in 1996. So this is stuff that actually did happen.
Yeah, this has happened, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes and no. Did NASA send that probe out?
Yes, they did.
The first one, yeah, the Curiosity rover.
Oh, okay.
The Curiosity rover was us, I believe.
Yep.
Now, I think Space...
Yeah.
What is his company called?
SpaceX.
SpaceX, but they are involved with the Mars stuff now, but I don't know if they were involved with the Curiosity rover.
No, they weren't.
Oh, okay.
I just know that the internet has given the Curiosity rover like a personality in like webtoons.
Yep.
And like every year he sings happy birthday, which I actually think he does.
Yes,
he actually does sing happy birthday to himself every year.
Yeah. It's a great way
but
to...
he powered down. He ran out of power, and I was like, oh my God. This webcomic is making me cry about a robot.
Yeah.
So.
In 2004, the United States president is found to have been bribing the Mexican president for illegal smuggling of Mexican resources on behalf of corporations.
Not the president in 2004, but I bet the president in 2018 was. You have to build the wall. You have to build the wall.
Well, that's making them build something that they don't even want. This is bribing for resources.
Yeah.
But why bribe when it comes through ports of call anyway? Yeah. You're getting it for free. You don't have to, well, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Well, the idea was taking in these resources for way cheaper, especially these corporations operating in Mexico, mining them and then shipping them without having to pay any kind of royalties or anything else to Mexico or the American government. So, I mean, it was an interesting thing. But so those are the events that Shadowrun foresaw in, trying to create what would eventually be their own apocalypse. We get in the weird stuff here. So this is where Shadowrun becomes Shadowrun. In 2011, the first baby is born with unique genetic expression, which is elves and dwarves are born to human parents. Many are abandoned or given up for adoption. In 2012, the Pope denounces metahumans and magic as abominations, and the Catholic Church fractures into various Catholic denominations as a result. In 2021, goblinization happens, where people all over the world suddenly and painfully shapeshift from being human to being orcs and ogres.
Oh, see, I didn't know this was the background of the universe. This is bizarre.
Yeah. So imagine, one morning I wake up and I start having violent spasms and I start shapeshifting into an orc. Yeah.
I'm kicking you out. I love you, but you're leaving. I'm not cleaning up after an orc or an ogre.
And that's actually part of the game, is that here they are still humans on the inside. They still have the human ideas, emotions, and know everything of who they were, but their bodies have shapeshifted into these other things.
Well, they clearly did not foresee Pope Francis, because I don't think he would call them abominations. I think he would be like, hey, you know what? We're Catholic. We like everybody.
Yeah.
Don't talk about the stuff we don't like.
But so you keep on going through this book as it builds up to 2050, which is where the Shadowrun universe really starts off. You have a new war between North and South Korea.
Not surprising.
You have a new genocidal war between the First Nation tribes and the United States government as well as corporations, which ends up being a battle of military versus true magic.
So do the First Nation tribes have magic?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. It gets interesting. The one specific group of freedom fighters and Native American rights activists take over a nuclear missile silo.
Okay.
And threaten the United States and say, we want our lands back or we're going to shoot these off. Well, they don't. It doesn't work. And America puts them on even worse reservations than they were on before. No. A guy shows up with magic and leads them off these reservations, and the government is trying to stop them and shooting bullets, and they're just deflecting off the shield that is surrounding this guy and his people. And
interesting.
Yeah, it turns into a huge war. Terrorist groups began rising. This was still when the Irish Republican Army, a lot of other terrorist groups became, in this world, become even more powerful.
Okay.
You have corporations buying things up that were once government entities and running things like prisons or making their own space program. And this was all written about and discussed as things leading to an Armageddon 30 years ago.
SpaceX.
Yeah. Isn't this funny? You know,
Mr. Musk.
By the time you finish reading these books, you'll want to join the tinfoil hat brigade, because these are all things that actually, many of these things are things that we could see possibly happening.
Yeah,
except maybe the magic and, you know.
Well, yeah, besides the more supernatural things, I do feel like some of these things were already kind of, depending on where you were in the world, certain technologies and things like this, or privatization of space exploration is probably not that far from what, I mean, you probably knew that was eventually going to happen, because there's no laws regarding space exploration, I don't think. I mean, the space is kind of open. It's the next frontier. And so I think they could see that. They're just tying it into a, you know, I mean, I don't know. Do they call it an Armageddon? I mean, that seems a little religious-y.
They do. They actually call it their
term?
pending
Wonderful.
Armageddon.
Oh.
You know.
The war is coming, the end of all things. Yep. All right, anyway, let's go on.
This game is so weird in that way, but, you know, it's like they introduce all these crazy Armageddon-like things that they thought would lead to a future that is Shadowrun, where, you know, corporations have taken over and the governments barely exist and the world is fractured and magic and all these creatures have come back around. And it's an extensive, huge timeline. So Shadowrun was created by the famous FASA, as Sam has said. Mm-hmm. So we have Jordan Weissman and Robert Charette, who are two of the big founders of FASA, in fact. Jordan,
now, is FASA Freedonia?
Yeah. Creator of BattleTech and all sorts of interesting games in that area. And they published it. This game was published with FASA from 1989 to 2001.
Yeah. So that's a long time.
Yeah, that's incredible.
12 years?
Mm-hmm.
Can I math? Yeah, 12 years.
Yeah. So a little known fact with the game Shadowrun. It is called Adventures in the Sixth World. That was the tagline on the original first edition book, which ties it to the game Earth Dawn, which Earth Dawn was called the Fourth World. In our modern age, the world that we live in currently is what they consider the Fifth World.
Oh.
And so all these things are supposed to be tied together. That Shadowrun is our possible future, and Earth Dawn is our possible past.
What about worlds 1 through 3?
You know, I don't know if they ever really worked that in, which is kind of one of those things.
They never explain it.
You know, it's like Leonard Part 6. What happened to the previous parts?
Or back in the golden age of Star Wars, you know, what happened to parts 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, it started with Part 4 for
people
New Hope.
Go, why did we ask?
Why did we ask?
We should have just shut up and let it go.
No, it's kind of a cool thing, because I'm wondering, did FASA really have a plan for that, or is it just, you know, one of those mysterious things that just because...
They just wanted to make it seem big? Yeah. That's cool.
It follows the Awakening, which is this massive event where magic is brought back into the world, magic that once existed, things that once existed in the old Earth Dawn world, but had disappeared from our world. And it's set in this world that embraces the marvels and dangers of technologies such as cyberspace, the merger of man and machine called cyberware. A lot of little tidbits. Mass culture, I guess you could say, comes from Shadowrun and the whole cyberpunk genre. The term The Matrix, being trapped in the Matrix, is not from the movie. The Matrix is
like it was never used before then?
It was used in Shadowrun and also used in Cyberpunk, the games.
Right, and
eventually it was made into the movie. They talk about in the movie The Matrix. You know, this idea of this interconnected 3D world.
Right,
that
but the first time it ever was a Matrix, an idea of a Matrix was
as far as
was in
a
Shadowrun?
virtual world.
Now, see, I thought there was a guy that had written books.
Mm-hmm. And I actually have several books of his, and he's part of the whole cyberpunk genre, but yeah.
Right, but he never presents an idea like that?
Well, Shadowrun, all these cyberpunk worlds are based out of this one writer. Sam, do you remember the writer?
Yeah, I think I have one or two of his somewhere.
William Gibson.
William Gibson, thank you.
The internet.
I was trying to think of it too. I was just couldn't.
Yeah, so he presents it, so it actually probably originates more with him.
Yeah, it does a little bit, but
that's what I was just like.
The popularity and
because it just seems far fetched, but I could be completely wrong that a movie franchise like The Matrix capitalized on something mentioned in a role playing game. I don't know,
or another fictional verse.
Okay,
that's my thing. I mean, ultimately, The Matrix was not. This idea of a massive, sprawling 3D world where the computer, inside of computers, is something that came out of the whole cyberpunk era of the 80s and 90s. That's pretty much the only conclusion I'm trying to draw with that.
Okay, no, that's fine. I was trying, I would be really impressed if Shadowrun's influence was that far-reaching that it influenced all of the cyberpunk stuff a majority of it. But it coming out in '89, Sam and I were just talking about this, that the '80s, with Blade Runner and all of that kind of stuff was already kind of becoming, that whole decade was this dark tech. Gritty future, technology leads to bad things, and
well, and that was the era we lived in. We lived in the era where people talked about acid rain, smog, the destruction of our natural resources. The more tied to technology we became, the less organic and human we became. I mean, even Studio Ghibli movies. A lot of the ones like Nazca of Wind Valley, those movies focus on that idea that technology will lead to our ruin. That was very much the spirit of the 80s, and cyberpunk kind of came out of that entire feeling and that, developed this genre. Small people in the world, what can you do to really stop it?
Right. Well, it's always interesting to me because, that idea that industry or technology is leading us down a dark path, they weren't wrong in some cases. I mean, it's only gotten worse, but it's like you look back at the 80s like it wasn't that bad. It can get so much worse. They can take over so much more than you know. Yep. So it's just interesting to me. But yeah, and we'll talk about it a little later, but that's one of the issues I have with cyberpunk and why I don't, really get into it is because I like the utopian tech.
Yeah, the idea that technology will guide us
that
towards
makes us
something
better, that improves humanity, where while there are augments and improvements to physical attributes, it makes the insides, it seem like, become way more, they reside in the gray area of morality, and that's kind of a bummer to me.
Well, as far as Shadowrun's reach in popular culture, so I mean, we're talking about 8 video games, over 50 fictional novels. It was made into a fan film in Germany, which actually is not a terrible movie. It's called The Run, a trading card game, a miniatures battle game, and a movie by Zombie Orpheus known as The Natural One, which I actually do have that movie, and I find it very enjoyable. The main character in that movie is very much like a character I would play.
I think I've seen that. Or maybe, do they start it? No, I have seen that one.
Where the guy gets kidnapped to be forced to play a role-playing game by the girl's brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Yeah, no, I've seen that one. It's okay.
I like that movie.
I know.
But for me, there's 3 things that make Shadowrun interesting. One of the things for me has been watching the game mature and change as technology in our real world has matured and changed. The original Shadowrun, the one that Sam played, you had to, like, if you were going to break into a corporation, you physically had to go to a corporation, find a data jack, plug into it while your team defended you, and you were stealing data physically at the location. It was computers. The internet did not exist when this game first came out.
Well, it existed.
It existed.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, it was like War Games
style
internet where you had to actually pick up the receiver of your
telephone.
Your telephone, and set it on the little device that it fit into, and
But for the game,
they had modems back then.
Yeah.
So we had a modem in our computer.
I mean, when did Al Gore invent the internet? Wasn't it around then?
No, it was after that. It was about 5 years after that.
Oh, okay. My bad.
But
I mean, in all technicality, the internet has existed, I think, since like the early part of the Cold War. A form of technology like that, but it was used only by the government.
But it wasn't
not
this
used
super sprawling thing. And the idea, I mean, this game was revolutionary when it first came out. The idea of even being able to carry a computer with you. I mean, that was the big deal with these Deckers, was they had a computer on them that they could go to these places and plug in with.
Yeah.
And then they could carry the computer away. I mean, that was crazy.
Well, I will say, it wasn't that... I remember I was working a job... we talk about, this crazy technology that's available to us today. But I remember very specifically being at lunch with some guys that I worked with, and when I was working in the IT department, and there was a new show that had started called like Scorpion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Okay, well, in the first episode of this show, here's my boss, who's the IT operations manager, and he's talking about, he's like, the show was really good. He said, but at the end, there's this plane that is taken off. And they need to get some data off of something. I don't remember exactly all because I've never seen it. But apparently this car is racing along with this plane. And the guy shoots down, the guy that's on the plane fishes down an Ethernet cable.
Oh my
so
gosh.
The guy can connect to it in the converter. And this has been in the last 5-6 years.
Wow.
That this has occurred, because I worked there from 2013 to 2015. So during that span of time, they were still depicting on television somebody having to, because they couldn't do it wirelessly. I don't know if because the plane was moving too fast or what, but yeah, he
must get close enough for Bluetooth signal.
Had to fish down, a Cat 5 cable to.
Better hope it wasn't the 6-foot version.
Oh, I know. It's like, I never have one that's long enough, and these jerks are putting one out of a plane that's taken off. That idea is not even completely out of the realm, and that's supposed to be a show about like super hackers and stuff. So I thought that was funny.
But so going from an age, though, I mean, a fictional world where you had to physically jack in. All of a sudden, in our world, in the real world, we have computers in the palms of our hands, and we have wireless, and we have Bluetooth. And as these things develop in our real world, the game's having to keep up and make even crazier leaps and bounds of imagination to seem futuristic, because the future's already catching up. And so it's been really interesting watching Shadowrun from 1st to 5th edition develop and change based on our own world. That's one of those things I find really interesting. Another thing that I really think is interesting, and this is going to be a little controversial, but I'm going to throw it out there, and that is the inclusion of things that are now seen as social justice topics when they weren't considered social justice topics. You have large swaths of the United States became nations specific to First Nation tribes. This was a part of the game. So the idea of indigenous rights and Native Americans, if you prefer that term rather than First Nation, these are things that are coming about in our world today that were part of this game when it came out. You have racism and classism are important parts that the players struggle against. You struggle against people thinking of you as an elf, or people thinking of you as an orc or an ogre, and treating you a certain way or looking at you a certain way. Mm-hmm. That's a huge part of this game, even on top of your nationality. In the game, they actually refer to people as Lat Elf, if you're a Latino elf, or Jap Elf, or Jap Dwarf.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, these are struggles that people face in the actual game. Mm-hmm. And nowadays, that would be considered social justice.
Well, and I also see, I don't know if where it says, and corporations rewriting the laws and controlling government in their own favor.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what's been going on, essentially, back pocket.
Yeah.
And it's done kind of obliquely, but it's also still kind of blunt.
Well,
you see some of the laws and you're like,
some of it
clearly,
you're just like
Blackwater or whatever it's called, yeah.
And just the willingness for a government giving
well, and
out
I'm sure it was.
contracts to this
I'm
one
sure it
group.
was going out. I'm sure stuff like this kind of stuff
Yeah.
is stuff that we've known about happening in government for a long time,
Yeah.
and it's not just necessarily this administration that's done it. They've just been a lot more open,
Yeah.
about it than.
But we also now live in an age when people are pointing at it and saying this is wrong.
Whereas
So-
before it was like, well, yeah, if you can make the law benefit your company and you find a way to do that, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. But the problem is it always hurts somebody else.
Yep.
So.
Now, the last thing I do love about Shadowrun, as far as things that it does differently, it includes the fantasy tropes. To poke fun, though, at the source material. Elves in this game are being mocked for being waif-like. People refer to them as dandelion eaters. Everybody, mocks them, expecting them
The
to...
dandelion eaters are sniffers.
Dandelion eaters.
Oh, okay.
And they always are like, oh, you're an elf, you must be a vegetarian. And the elf's like, screw you, no, I'd like my steak rare. They play
I
against...
still don't like elves. I don't care how
Yeah.
they like their steak.
But they play against the stereotypes.
Yeah.
Dwarfs are mocked for being short and being really good at building crap. But the thing is that in the game, especially if you read the novels, there's plenty of dwarfs that are just like, I don't know how to do this crap. Why do you automatically expect me to do this?
Yeah. Oh, so it's like my elf that I made.
Exactly.
That everybody expects my elf to be really
Exactly.
good at, like to be a Legolas, but he's just like, no.
Yeah. No, and this game plays that up because being an elf doesn't give you longer life. It doesn't automatically make you graceful. But this is one of those things where society gravitates to these things.
J.R.R. Tolkien would disagree with you, sir.
Oh, of course he would. Of course he would.
I'm going to slap you in your face because on his behalf,
But
elves are graceful.
But the game strives for the characters to only occasionally play into those tropes. Not to they exist, but by and large, you're supposed to be struggling against them.
In one of the books, wasn't there an orc who was a shaman or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, everyone thinks orc, okay, it's this guy, I mean, he's, brute, tough, and he's going to beat the heck out of everybody. And this one in one of the books, he's a mage. He summons natural spirits, so.
One of the books, in the most recent series by Catalyst Game Labs, they put out some novels based on their current property. And there is an ogre shaman. So here's this 10-foot, 12-foot tall guy with horns on his head that looks really barbaric, but he wears a 3-piece suit. And he's always going to a magic club where, he sits down, has his tea, and reads. And that it's one of those things where he's playing against the stereotype of what you would expect from him.
Yeah.
I love that. I find it very interesting. And this was really a game that in the 80s, I can't think of anything else that really did that tried to poke fun at it a little bit.
It was pretty revolutionary because Cyberpunk came out 1 year before Shadowrun did, and it was nothing but technology. So when Shadowrun came out, I remember people going, Cyberpunk with elves and dwarves, that's stupid. I don't really see it as like trying to poke fun at themselves. I saw it more as a very visible, in-your-face expression or display of racism.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you were saying, racism and classism. Because really, in the books, for the most part, metahumans, I think is what they were called, metahumans, they were looked down upon collectively, if I remember correctly. And that was kind of part of the struggle of you want to be an elf, cool, but there's going to be places and things. So you had to actually work your way through it. It was actually good in that regard, I think.
Yeah, and I think that people forget, because right now in the old school gaming crowd, which is a big thing right now on the internet, there is this move of people saying, I don't want politics in my RPGs. I just want to play my RPGs. Quit pushing your politics into it. And I'm like, politics have always been in our RPGs. Shadowrun had all these things in it that were very, very political. And I think we were young enough that we didn't associate it with politics. It was just like, this is the world we're playing in. But it is incredibly political. And it's always been there. I myself, for me, it was playing a half-elf and experiencing, this idea of not belonging to one people or another really gave me kind of a parallel towards people in my, I live in the South and I live in, Texas, people who are from two different races in our world. People who were are African American and white, or white and Latino. In the 80s, being not of one or the other, even if we tried to strive against that racism, there is still something there. Mm-hmm. And playing this game gave me a way to see that and to make a parallel between it and to experience it myself and say, this is wrong. And so I think role-playing games have always been political, and they've been a great way for us to experience some of the things that are wrong with our world and want to fix them.
Shadowrun definitely was political. In fact, it probably, you could argue that it was even more political because, like you were saying at the beginning, governments kind of virtually really don't exist anymore. They're just kind of this skeleton framework. It's the corporations. Mm-hmm. The corporations are the one with all the power. So, and that's how a lot of Shadowrun teams work. The corporations hire them and say, go over to ABC Manufacturing and, wipe out their code or whatnot. So it's very political. So the people who don't want politics, all right, cool. That's kind of boring to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now we've waxed philosophical and political on the topic.
Every episode, I feel like we
yeah.
That's just us. That's how we are.
That's how we are, and if you were at our table, you'd probably experience it. Let's go ahead and let's look at the physical properties a little bit. Today I think I have the 3rd edition book down. It might be the 3rd or the 4th edition book down here with us.
Yeah, this is not the one that I've seen before, but I think I've seen the 5th edition book that you had.
Yep. No, I absolutely... There's been an art style change over the years with Shadowrun. The 1st edition books were your perfect bound, because perfect binding by that point had definitely become the industry standard. So they were soft bound, black and white with black and white art. And in the old books, it followed that. And then Shadowrun has really matured over the years well. And in this book, you have full color illustrations, incredibly well done background, pretty good flow through the book, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a little bit of, I feel sometimes people try to be as different from D&D as possible, and when they do that, they can disturb and break the flow of their product.
Right.
Because D&D is like the common wheelhouse of here's how we lay out our chapters. This book tried to break away from a lot of that and put a lot more fiction up front and a lot more information in different ways. I like the flow of it, and I think they do a really good job. But I just think it's a high quality product at this point. And there's a new edition out from Shadowrun. I think we're 2 more editions after that one you're looking at there. And every time...
This is the 20th anniversary, so this should be 4th edition.
Okay, so that's the 4th edition. There's one more after that one.
Yeah.
And every time their books just look prettier, the layout looks better, the covers are more solid, the paper looks like it's a higher quality.
Yeah, it's this one is fully compatible with all 4th edition books. So
I just am totally blown away by the physical properties.
It does look very good. Oh, there's the character that I played.
Yep. It has wonderful. Thank you so much, Catalyst, for doing that, and including up front in a very visible section characters that are pre-made for people who don't want to take the time to figure out their character creation process. Because it is a point-by system.
It is a daunting system. I tried to do it by myself once, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I don't have the attention span for this.
You get a whole lot of points, and you choose your race, and then you start building your character from scratch. You put points into the same point pool generates your statistics, your skills, and the money that you buy your equipment with.
That reminds me of another game that we've...
Dark Eye does something very similar. There are a couple games that are point-buy systems.
I thought there was another one that we did in an episode, but I can't remember now.
Yeah. Part of this game, it is also a roll-and-keep system. You put together a dice pool based upon your core attribute, your skill, and your equipment, and you roll a bunch of dice.
Yeah, I do know the jokes that I always hear about Shadowrun are just the cubes of dice, the D6s, the just enormous amount of D6s, because everybody buys those little 36 cubes.
Yeah.
Those 36 bricks of mini D6s and plays a lot of Shadowrun.
I really enjoy the mechanic, and if you were the kind of person that you're just like, I want to roll a whole bunch of dice, I don't just want to roll one dice, give me tons of dice, that's fun, this is definitely the game for you. Because I've been in situations where I've rolled over 20 dice. That does get to be a lot of fun.
It does seem like a lot of fun. So you roll and you keep certain ones?
Yeah, it's much like...
Vast?
Or
not Vast, but...
Well, Vast does it too.
Storyteller system.
Storyteller system is a roll and keep. The Legend of the Five Rings is a roll and keep. Besom is technically a roll and keep because you're rolling a certain stat. You're rolling your D6, And 4, 5, 6 is a success.
Okay.
Shadowrun is much the same way.
Ninja Crusade.
Yeah, Ninja Crusade is roll and keep.
Is the same way, yeah.
And so, yeah, you build the pool, roll your dice, keep your successes. Every number 4, 5, 6 is a success. There are times where you will have pieces of equipment that will augment that, and that's a lot of fun. Where like suddenly it's like, oh, by the way, you're using a shotgun. In this one edition of the game, I don't know if they kept through all of them, but one edition's like, here's this shotgun that has a huge ability. You're going to get successes on 3 through 6.
Okay.
Very good game, in my opinion. It does exactly what it sets out to do. The books are brilliant. The question comes up, I guess, at this point, what happened to Shadowrun? FASA shuttered its doors at 2001.
Yeah, I like this note that you made about FASA shuttering its doors in 2001, not because of bankruptcy, but to withdraw from what they saw was a downward trend in the market.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you both, do you feel that in 2000... Now, was that a downward trend in cyberpunk or a downward trend in RPG gaming? And if the latter, do both of you as long-term gamers, because I wasn't even out of high school yet, and I definitely wasn't playing RPGs then.
I think cyberpunk, everyone kind of got tired of cyberpunk. Did the Matrix movies come out?
Yeah.
Around
97, I thought, was when the Matrix movies came out.
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing. But I think at one point, I seem to remember at one point, cyberpunk was they were kind of dropping off.
Or 99, I'm sorry, 99.
Yeah.
The whole cyberpunk thing was really, kind of like how steampunk is now. Everyone's getting really sick of it, which makes me sad. So I think that's probably what they saw. And unfortunately, cyberpunk really kind of, I don't know, John. I would say cyberpunk really hasn't recovered from that. It's kind of like small groups play them now, still play it.
I'm going to go at it from a little bit different angle because, cyberpunk definitely has met a downward trend. It is nowhere near as popular as it once was. But looking at it as the role-playing market, so in 2001, FASA was not just shutting down Shadowrun, they were also shutting down MechWarrior, they were shutting down Earth Dawn, they were shutting down every game property that they had at that time. So this is across all genres. And so the downward trend that they saw falling apart really was the role-playing games, tabletop role-playing. Now, the question I would ask, once I finish this, is was it a good decision? Mm-hmm. So we have, in that time period, we have video games and computer games really excelling and entering a place where first-person shooters and games that were much more immersive were definitely coming out. What tabletop RPGs set out to do, video games were now able to visualize and bring to people. And so you have that all of a sudden. So there was that in the market. At the same time, we have the beginning of the D20 bust under 3rd edition D&D going into 4th edition D&D, all in the same time period. Yeah, there was definitely a downward trend coming, where we have Wizards of the Coast ending their OGL and moving to 4th edition. You have all those companies that were, mass producing stuff for the OGL. Just tons and tons and tons of material. Not all of it good, not all of it bad, but just endless amounts of material. And you had system bloat out the wazoo. Mm. So
you had a ton of those, actually. The third-party books.
Oh yeah,
I remember those. Those were a ton of them.
Yep.
Some were good, but a lot were bad too. So
yeah, and you have all this. I mean, it really was, in my opinion, kind of a perfect storm where the entire, the fandom suddenly collapsed. People were moving off into other things, and people were tired of spending money. And I'm worried, I'll be honest, right this moment, as a tabletop, kind of person who watches the industry a little bit, I'm worried that we're seeing that a little bit right now in the Kickstarter market, where there are so many games coming out on Kickstarter that people, the game comes out and then it goes away. And I'm worried that the market is kind of starting to falter a little bit for the same reason. The benefit, however, and the reason I don't think it's happening is because many good games are coming out on Kickstarter. Like games that are super high quality and they're catching people's attention, they stand. It's not like I just backed this game and it's crap. It's like I backed this game and it's wonderful and I'll continue to play it for a long time.
Right.
I think people are just going to have to be much more discerning about what they back at this point.
Right.
But so FASA shuttered its doors and said, okay, we're getting out of the tabletop gaming business. And it wasn't bankruptcy, it was business. They wanted to go out while they were on top and selling the rights to still popular game systems, worlds, and genres while they still could make money. So many of their digital rights for their games went to Microsoft. If you ever played the game Crimson Skies, any of the editions of that came out of FASA Studios. And so the video games for Crimson Skies, there were, of course, the Mech Warrior and Battletech games that Microsoft put out for a while.
Oh, so all their stuff.
Yeah. The digital rights went to Microsoft. Now, the tabletop rights to continue making the games went to Topps. And Topps owns those properties, still owns them to this day, but they licensed it out to FanPro, which we know about from Dark Eye.
You have WizKids listed, too.
WizKids is a sub-company of Topps.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes.
See, I always get confused because WizKids always makes me think Wizards of the Coast. And I always forget that WizKids is not.
So they licensed it out to FanPro, which, of course, is the company that did Dark Eye, and they're originally out of Germany. And they left, and now those rights belong to Catalyst Game Labs. And Shadowrun is still going strong there. Shadowrun is still a tabletop RPG developed by them, and they took it over in the 3rd edition under FanPro, and it's going great. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing, and here's the fun part. After all was said and done with the Shadowrun universe and the end of FASA as we know it, or we knew it, FASA has kind of come back under its own thing, but Jordan Weissman, who was the creator and originator of this game system, Shadowrun, started up a little video game company called Harebrained Schemes. And they have begun to produce games for Battletech and Shadowrun, available both on iPad and computers. And it's the original guy.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so I love that. And it's a kind of a cool note to end on for myself with this system, is that this is a happy ending for a role-playing game that we're discussing on here, because it's still going. The game is still going, and the people who made it are still involved and still out there and doing great stuff. My final thoughts, as always, is would you want to play this game?
Well, we've talked about it. Like I said, I've played a little bit. We did the little starter adventure.
On the Run for fourth edition.
We did that with a friend of mine up in Missouri when we were there very quickly, and then gifted him the book that we had on hand, which actually I believe was we played 4th edition, but we were using a 5th edition book because you knew how to, and we didn't know any better either. But we had a good time. I played the little dwarf drone rigger. But I think I would play it again. I've been trying to, be a little bit more perceptive and open to, not perceptive, but receptive toward cyberpunk and things in that genre, because they do have some really cool concepts and ideas. And I just think it depends on the nature of the adventure and probably the GM as well. But I'd definitely be open to playing it. I love to roll a lot of dice, and I don't get to play many games where I do. So I think it would be a good time.
Sam, how about you? Would you ever come back to this system for Shadowrun?
There is no word to describe just how much I would want to play it. I came up with a character concept, which I thought was fantastic. And this guy, and this is when I was really young, this guy's like, oh, yeah, I'll run it. We played one game, and that was it. I'm like, okay, well, shoot. Well, then I went to someone else, and they're like, oh, we'll run Shadowrun. Yay! Played like 1 or 2 games, done. And I've never been able to play this character for any length of time. So, yes, I would definitely play it and assault the DM with this character and say, here. So
this is what I'm doing.
Yep. I, of course, definitely would play Shadowrun, and I definitely would run this game. It holds a very special place in my heart. Sometimes I get a little bit... I can be a little bit harsh on it because it is so different from the future that we live in currently.
Yeah, but you just push the dates out a little farther. Yeah. That's what I would do. I mean, some of the stuff could be pretty well melded. You could take our world today and take just add in the fantastic stuff, because there's a lot of seemingly pre-apocalyptic events happening in our own world, even right now. That you could use as a catalyst for some of this stuff. So.
And it's true, but I also think that we are in currently a reemerging of the cyberpunk genre, to be honest, because we have the cyberpunk video game that's going to be released soon. And this is a neat little tie-in that I'll just go ahead and toss out. So February is, of course, Black History Month. Mm-hmm. And Michael Pondsmith and Cody Pondsmith of Our Talasaurian Games, who are responsible for the creation of the cyberpunk game itself, they are both African-American game creators. Okay. And so I definitely want to toss that out there. Huge shout out to them and happy Black History Month because they made history. They're major tabletop campaign creators.
Well, and are they also by the new video game?
They licensed the right out to.
They licensed it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, huge shout out to them on that, and of course, happy Black History Month for that. Also, we have Battle Angel Alita coming out in theaters here very soon, which is also very much a cyberpunk style movie.
The movie is called Alita.
Battle
Angel.
And I'm certain that I'm fanboying big time over that.
He's super excited, guys. He's been talking about it for days and days and days, yes, and years and years and years.
And my wife has bought me tickets to a special preview of it, so I am so excited. And so hey, go check out the game and give it a try yourselves. I'm thinking you'll enjoy it. But anyway, this is Tome Travelers, and we are Passion Nerdly Podcasts. You can find us on Facebook, and we have our website, of course, passionnerdly.com. So
there will be links featured in the show notes, and also I believe at the end of the episode we have a little exit that'll talk about it. So we hope to see you somewhere on the internets. Jack in, or whatever they say. I don't even know what they say.
All right.
We'll see you guys later.
Chummers. This podcast is produced by Passion Nerdly in association with the Nerds Domain and our parent network, the Southgate Media Group. This podcast could not exist without their support or from support by Patreons like you. For more information on how you can get involved, visit passionnerdly.com.
This has been a production of the Southgate Media Group. For more podcasts like this one, head over to southgatemediagroup.com.
Passion Nerdly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.